about Abraham Lincoln in Gettysburg and one of the pivotal battles of the Civil War to end the abomination of slavery. And Lincoln gets up a few days, I think, after that terrible war, blood still on the ground. And he says to the American people, a few days after that battle, he said, "These brave soldiers," in so many words, "did not die in vain." Because they died in order to maintain a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, not as Trump would have us, a government of the billionaire class, by the billionaire class, and for the billionaire class. Will my colleague yield for a question?
I will yield for a question.
Well, let me thank Senator Merkley for today pointing a finger at one of the great crises our country, one of the greatest crises our country has faced, I think, since the Civil War. And that is that every day we have a president who is moving this country into an authoritarian form of society. You know, as a nation, what we have always expected in our democracy is that if you disagree with me, we debate the issue. You don't think I'm a good senator? Run against me. You think I'm wrong on an issue? Write a letter to the editor. Do a podcast. Be critical of me in any way you want. But what very few people in America believe is that we should give more and more power to a megalomaniac who sits in the White House, who disrespects every day the Constitution of the United States and the rule of law. And what saddens me very much is when we think back on the history of this country, going back to the extraordinarily brave men and women who put their lives on the line and sometimes died during the Revolutionary War. Tens of thousands of Americans took on the greatest military power on earth, led by the King of England, in order to say, we are tired of your rule. We want to rule ourselves. And then in 1789, these brilliant people came up with a constitution, and the essence of that constitution, having learned their lesson from the King of England, who had absolute power, is what they said: we are going to create a constitution that will never give absolute power to any one person or one entity. So they created an executive branch, the president, legislative branch, Congress, House, and the Senate, and a judiciary whose function is to provide checks and balances on each other. Rather extraordinary document, 1789. And since then, we have had so many millions of men and women putting their lives on the line and sometimes dying in order to defend that Constitution. To understand that what freedom is about is the right to disagree. That we do not have to live under the control of one person. And in an unprecedented way, and I know my colleague from Oregon has been talking about this, every day there is another attack on basic American freedoms. The First Amendment, not the second, not the third, First Amendment to the Constitution is freedom of the press. And that was not an accident. They understood that in order to maintain a free society, you had to have the right of people to express their point of view, to write what they wanted to do, to rally people around their point of view. And yet we have, in an unprecedented way, a president who has sued one major media after another, ABC, CBS, Meta defunded PBS, defunded the NPR. This is a president who does not want to be criticized. Well, guess what, Mr. President? In a democracy, you will be criticized. I will be criticized. Senator from Oregon will be criticized. That is what a democracy is about. And if you don't like criticism, get out of the White House. Get out of politics. And we're not going to sit back and allow one media after another, intimidated, frightened that if they stand up tomorrow and run a story critical of the President of the United States, oh my God, they may be sued. And you got an FCC chairman, I think, I say to my friend, during the Jimmy Kimmel episode, was now threatening to rescind licenses of networks if the White House did not like some of the content that was coming out. That's not the America that we love. not the America that we are prepared to defend. But it's not just the media. You got a president who was suing law firms. And what was the crime of these law firms? What did they do that was so terrible? Well, they had clients who went to court against the president. Gee, last that I heard, that's what happens in a country. You know, people go to court. And we don't then try to blackmail and intimidate law firms by saying, we're going to sue you. You better not have clients who are going to attack me. We have a president now who's going to war against universities, trying to break freedom of speech, freedom of dissent on college campuses. You stand up, you protest. Hey, we're going to take away money from you. We don't like the content of your courses. We don't like your teachers, your faculty, the president of the university. Your views on Gaza? Sorry, you're not going to get federal funding. We have a president who's usurping the powers of the United States Congress. Every fourth grader understands Congress has the power of the purse. President, if he likes it, signs the bill. But when you sign that appropriations bill, that money goes out. You don't have the right to say, oh, California, New York, Vermont, you voted against me. You ain't going to get the money that was appropriated. That is not what this country is about, and it is not what the Constitution is about. A few minutes ago, Senator Blunt Rochester asked, I thought, a pretty profound question, and that is, what is the relationship between authoritarianism and the healthcare crisis that we're in right now? And as the senator from Oregon has mentioned, when Trump was inaugurated, sitting right beside him, right behind him, were the three wealthiest people in the world. Remember the senator from Oregon? It was Mr. Musk, Mr. Bezos, and Mr. Zuckerberg. And right behind them was some 14 or 15 other billionaires. Oh, there's, all right, thank you, Senator. All right, there's Mr. Zuckerberg, Mr. Bezos, Mr. Musk, and a couple of other billionaires there as well. And I was thinking, I was at the inauguration, kind of up front, and as I listened and I saw what was going on, heard Trump's speech, I was thinking about Abraham Lincoln in Gettysburg and one of the pivotal battles of the Civil War to end the abomination of slavery. And Lincoln gets up a few days, I think, after that terrible war, blood still on the ground. And he says to the American people, a few days after that battle, he said, these brave soldiers, in so many words, did not die in vain. Because they died in order to maintain a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, not as Trump would have us, a government of the billionaire class, by the billionaire class, and for the billionaire class. And when Senator Blunt Rochester asked the question, what is the connection between authoritarianism and healthcare? Well, I'll tell you what the connection is. Right now, under the Trump administration, the billionaire class has never, ever had it so good. These guys, sitting right behind Trump and his organization, are now combined hundreds of billions of dollars richer. They donated to Trump's campaign. They've given him gifts since. They are doing phenomenally well, while at the same time, 60% of our people, working class people or income people, are struggling to put food on the table, pay for childcare, send their kids to college, pay for the basic necessities of life, pay for housing, etc. Billionaire class under Trump never, ever had it so good. And then we got a working class in America struggling to survive. And in particular, let us never forget, and I know the senator from Oregon has mentioned it many times, that the reason that Trump and his Republican friends made $1 trillion in cuts to Medicaid, to throw 15 million people off the health care they currently have, and studies, by the way, suggest that when you throw 15 million low-income and working-class people off of their health care, some 50,000 people a year will die unnecessarily. So why did Trump and his friends do that? Well, the answer is obvious. In that same terrible bill, they gave $1 trillion in tax breaks to the 1%, to the people sitting right behind the president when he was inaugurated. Does anybody in America really believe that it makes sense to give $1 trillion in tax breaks to the richest people in America and at the same time throw 15 million working class people off of their health care, and then, as the senator from Oregon indicated, right now in Vermont and all over this country, people are receiving notices from their insurance companies. In my state, a few days ago, southern part of the state, it wasn't a doubling of their premiums, it was a quadrupling of their premiums. So at a time when we are already paying the highest prices in the world for health care by far, people are going to look at these bills and say, it's insane. And again, in Vermont, we're seeing now families going to be paying 45, 50%. I say to my friend from Oregon, 50% of their incomes on health care. How do you survive? When you're spending 50% of your income on health care, what do you have left for food or for anything else? What the connection is between authoritarianism and oligarchy is that these billionaires not only don't want to pay their fair share of taxes, they want tax breaks. Not only do they want to, with impunity, be able to break unions and throw workers out on the street, but they want, in many ways, what existed in the 1700s, what our forefathers fought against. They want the divine right to rule. All right? King of England thought that they had a God-given divine right to rule. These guys think that as multi-billionaires, they have the right to do anything, no accountability. They're bringing forth hundreds of billions of dollars right now investing in AI and robotics, which will, if we don't deal with it, have a devastating impact on the working class of this country. Yeah, you're going to have more factories in America, but you know what? Ain't going to be human beings working in those factories. Elon Musk, I don't agree with Musk on anything. But just the other day, I think Musk made it clear. He said, hey, AI and robotics is going to do away with jobs. There are going to be any jobs. You don't need any jobs in America. Well, that's great if you're worth a couple $100 billion, but you don't have a job and you're a working class person. How do you feed your family? How do you afford health care? You got anybody in the White House is saying, I'm nice worrying about you when you lose your job? I don't think so. So we are in an unprecedented and difficult moment in American history. And I want to thank the 7 million people just this Saturday all over this country who came out and said loudly and clearly, no more kings. And we're going to keep that movement going. And I don't care if you are a conservative, a progressive, a socialist, a Democrat, whatever you may be. We understand that what makes our country great is, in fact, freedom, the right to dissent, the right to argue. And I don't care what your politics are, that's what we've got to maintain. And I want to conclude simply by saying, expressing a very great deal of disappointment at my Republican colleagues, with few exceptions. The vast majority of Republicans in the Senate and the House are not authoritarians. They believe in the Constitution, they believe in the rule of law, but they, at this moment at least, with very few exceptions, simply do not have the courage to stand up to this authoritarian president. How many times has the senator from Oregon and me heard that our Republican friends believe in small government, in federalism, the right of the local government? They don't want that big, bad federal government overruling the needs of cities and towns and states. And now you got a president of the United States sending federal troops into Portland, Oregon, and Chicago, Illinois, usurping the rights of Congress, threatening to impeach judges who rule against them. So this is a very difficult, unprecedented moment in our history, but I have every confidence that when the American people stand together and they do not let Trump and his friends divide us up by the color of our skin or where we were born or our sexual orientation, when we stand together, defend the Constitution, defend American democracy, we will prevail and we will defeat authoritarianism and we will defeat oligarchy. And I would simply ask my friend from Oregon a profound question. Do you agree with me?
Thank you to my colleague from Vermont, and I appreciate your points, and I do share them, yes, and you expressed them thoroughly and passionately, and thank you for your advocacy. And I see that my colleague...
In the Senate chamber, the words hung heavy in the air. A government of the billionaire class, by the billionaire class, and for the billionaire class. Bernie Sanders didn't shout them. He didn't have to. They struck with the quiet violence of truth, echoing through a Congress too accustomed to silence. In that moment, the marble walls seemed to listen. Cameras froze. Even his colleagues, weary, cautious, and rehearsed, looked up. What we had just witnessed was not another partisan speech. It was a reckoning, a reminder that democracy, left unattended, begins to rot from the inside. Sanders wasn't just accusing Donald Trump of moral failure. He was naming a deeper betrayal, a system that has traded its soul for wealth, that has forgotten the very words carved into its foundation, of the people, by the people, for the people. This was no ordinary Senate floor. It was a stage where history's ghosts gathered. Lincoln at Gettysburg, Franklin at Independence Hall, the nameless soldiers who bled for an idea greater than themselves. Sanders summoned them all to testify, not as Democrats or Republicans, but as witnesses to the erosion of the republic they built. He invoked the Constitution not as a relic, but as a living contract now under siege, not from a foreign army, but from an American oligarchy wearing tailored suits and carrying checkbooks instead of rifles. Behind his words lay a chilling portrait of power, a president who sues the press for telling the truth, a White House that weaponizes fear against universities and journalists, billionaires seated at the inauguration like courtiers before a modern king. It's a vision of America that feels unrecognizable, yet unmistakably ours. And when Sanders named the billionaires, Musk, Bezos, Zuckerberg, it wasn't envy he spoke with. It was indictment. Because behind every tax cut and deregulation, behind every shuttered factory and gutted Medicaid program, there stands the smiling face of privilege pretending it earned its throne. He reminded us that while the powerful prosper, millions of Americans wake each morning wondering how to pay for insulin, how to keep the lights on, how to survive the next premium notice. It wasn't hyperbole when Sanders said this moment rivals the crises of the Civil War, because the question now, as then, is who governs this nation, a self-serving elite or the collective will of its people. Authoritarianism doesn't begin with tanks in the streets. It begins when leaders teach us to accept cruelty as policy, greed as normal, and silence as patriotism. Senator Jeff Merkley, standing beside Sanders, lent quiet gravity to the moment. He didn't grandstand. He simply agreed. Yes, I share those points. And in that brief exchange, you could feel a truth so rare it almost startled the room. Unity not in party, but in purpose. Two men, weary yet resolute, daring to call tyranny by its name. Their warning was clear. The battle for democracy isn't being fought in foreign deserts or on encrypted networks. It's being fought here, in the fine print of laws, in the boardrooms that bankroll elections, in the silence of legislators who know better but fear more. It's being fought every time a president decides which states deserve funding based on loyalty, every time truth is threatened by a lawsuit, every time power hides behind patriotism. Sanders's voice trembled not with age, but with conviction. No more kings, he said, and for a fleeting second it felt as though the ghosts of 1776 nodded in agreement, because what he described, a democracy reshaped into a corporation, is not freedom. It's feudalism reborn. The divine right of kings traded for the divine right of capital. He spoke of AI and robotics, not as technological marvels, but as omens of a new economic order, one where progress enriches the few and replaces the many. He warned of a future where human worth is measured not in labor or courage, but in profit margin. It wasn't science fiction. It was prophecy, a glimpse into the next frontier of exploitation, disguised as innovation. In his conclusion, Sanders's tone shifted. Less fury, more faith. When the American people stand together, he said, we will defeat authoritarianism and oligarchy. The line landed not as hope, but as defiance, a declaration that the struggle is far from over, and that democracy, for all its fractures, still breathes in the courage to speak. And that is the lesson of this hearing. That truth, even when whispered, can pierce the armor of power. That morality, though mocked by cynics, remains the most radical act in politics. Sanders reminded us that the Constitution is not self-enforcing. It demands guardians. It demands citizens who refuse to surrender their outrage to exhaustion. As the cameras faded and senators filed out, you could almost feel the weight of the words lingering, not in the chamber, but in the conscience of a country deciding who it wants to be. Are we still the nation of Lincoln's promise, or have we become the empire he warned against? The answer will not come from a single speech or a single man. It will come from us, in every vote, every protest, every refusal to accept the normalization of injustice. Because if democracy is dying, it's not from an assassin's bullet. It's from the slow suffocation of apathy. In the end, the moral of this hearing is not complicated. Power will always seek to own what it cannot understand. But history belongs to those who fight back, those who, like Sanders and Merkley, refuse to let silence become complicity. So when you hear the next speech, the next scandal, the next promise of greatness, remember this moment. Remember what it looks like when truth dares to speak in the halls of power. Remember that freedom does not protect itself. This is Political Life USA. Support our work to expose the truth.